Hello guys, my name is mhd.ikhfan and I standing in front of this camera is want to tell you about several topics or several things about teaching English as a foreign language guys. And yeah, let's go to the topic. The first topic is I wanna talk about is about history of language learning. Okay, I have a simpler version of the history of language teaching. Okay, the first is ancient times, is according to Greece and Rome. The second is a Middle Age and Renaissance, and the third is 18th and 19th centuries grammar translation method. The fourth is the late 19th century reform movement, and the fifth, the 20th century. Sixth, in 1970s communicative, and the last is modern time mix of methods. According to McLuhan, observed that language teaching methods is revert to the classroom technique and practice that are used in teaching of a second language. So, the methodology and method in language teachings is, okay, I would like to tell about the first is methodology. Methodology is refers to the study of teaching language skills that including planning, preparing, and evaluating. And the next is a method. Okay guys, methods are a specific classroom technique and practice used to teach a second language, often based on a particular approach. So guys, in this topic there is have a evaluation of language teaching method. The first evaluation is a grammar translation method, is focusing on grammar rules and translating between language common in the 19th century. The second is a direct method. In this direct method is emphasize direct communication in target language, emergent in the early 20th century. The third is about audiolingual method that emphasize also direct communication in target language and emerged in the early 20th century also, same as number 2. And the number 4 is audiovisual method. That audiovisual method use drills and repetition to develop fluency, and this popular in the mid of 20th century, that influenced by behaviorism. And next is cognitive code method that emphasize understanding language structure and meaning. This emerged or popular in the 1960s, that influenced by cognitive psychology. Okay, the next is communicative language teaching, is focusing on developing communicative competence that become prominent in the late of 20th century. After we hear that, we come to the technique and approach. Okay, I will explain the difference between technique and approach. The first technique. Technique is referred to specific acts or behavior used by teacher to enhance learning, including using virtual aids or providing feedback and method. And the next is method. Method is referred to systematic and organized ways used to teach a particular subject or core area approach. Okay, and then approach. Approach in language teaching is a theory about the nature of a language and language learning that serve as the source of practice and principle in a language teaching. An approach is a set of idea, belief, and principle that guide teacher in deciding what to teach and why to teach it, and how to present it. It's based on the theories about the nature of language and language learning, and suggest method and technique that can lead to effective language learning. Okay guys, we move to the next topic. It's about language teaching. Okay, sorry guys. In this topic, I will talk about concept and language teaching. The first is teaching approach. Teaching approach, it is a set of principles, belief, or ideas about the nature of a learning which is translated into the classroom. The second is a teaching method. The teaching method is a systematic way of doing something that implies an orderly logical arrangement of steps. It is procedural. The third is teaching technique. Teaching technique are such steps we follow when we teach. It is the teacher's style or tricks to accomplish an immediate objective. The fourth is a teaching strategy. Teaching strategy are methods of approaching a problem or task. Modes of operation for achieving a particular end or plan designed for controlling and manipulating certain information. And the fifth is a teaching model. Okay. Teaching model is a conceptual framework that describes how teachers and students interact in the learning process. Okay guys, in this topic we have to know the terms in the language teaching. There is 4 terms in the language teaching. The first is ESL, the second is EFL, and the third is a TESOL, and the last is Manglish or Singlish. Okay, I will provide to you the explanation about the 4 terms. The first is ESL. ESL, we can call that English as a second language. ESL is typically used in the countries where English is primary language, such as like United States and also Australia. The next is EVL, or we can call it English as a foreign language. FEL specially focus on teaching English to non-native speakers in countries where English is not the primary language. The example like our country, Indonesia. The next is TESOL. TESOL is a teaching English to speakers of other language. This TESOL refers to the broader field of the teaching English to the non-native speakers, that encompassing both of teaching English as a second language, ESL, and an EVL. And now we go to the last is Manglish or Singlish. Manglish and Singlish are colloquial forms of English used in Malaysia and Singapore. Respectively, they incorporate local dialects and cultural expression, often diverging from standard English understanding. This variation is crucial for effective communication in their respective contexts. Okay, after I explain about the language teaching, next I want to tell about teaching method. There is several methods that we can use. The first is audiolingual. Audiolingual is a method in a foreign language learning that use partial pattern exercise or mime that limited or imitation and memorization to facilitate that language learning process. This includes the use of conversation as a basic for learning with a focus on listening and speaking skill before reading and writing. The goals of this method is there is two objectives in this method. The first method is short range. Objective include training in listening comprehension and accurate pronunciation. And the second is a long range. This objective or the ultimate goals is to develop the student ability are the same like what native speaker have, to use it automatically without stopping to think. So if you guys ask me, there is an advantage for this method. Yes, the answer is yes. Because of all students act in a classroom, the stage of the class more interesting and lively, and speaking and listening skills are better trained. And not just the advantage, and this method also have a disadvantage, of course. Because grammar skill is untrained, students were not able to transfer skills to real communication outside the classroom. Many students found boring and unsatisfying. The next method in this topic is a direct method. The direct method is a language teaching approach that emphasizes teaching a foreign language through immersion and the use of target language. Without relying on the translation or the student native language, it aims to develop language skill naturally. Much like how a child learns their first language. And in this method is also have the advantage. The advantage is a natural acquisition. It mimics how people learn their native language, making it more natural approach to language acquisition. And this improves speaking skill for a student. Since the focus is on the speaking and listening, students often gain a greater fluency. And the other advantage is a contextual learning. In contextual learning, vocabulary and grammar are learned in context, making it easier for students to remember and apply them. The next method is indirect method. The indirect method is a language teaching method that focuses on the explicit learning of a grammar and language structures. And this method is based on a cognitive theory which emphasizes the importance of conceptual understanding in language learning. So, if you ask me again, there is the advantage, and the answer is yes. This helps students to understand the structures of the language in depth and provide a strong foundation for the development of other language skills. And also, in this method, there is have a disadvantage, and that can be boring for the student if not implemented creatively. Less focus and developing skill and the listening skill is one of the disadvantages for this method. After I explain about the teaching method, I have another teaching method that I call teaching method 2. There is included physical response method, grammatical translation method, and cognitive approach. The first is total physical response, or we call it TPR. TPR is a method where students learn English through physical action like following simple commands by the teacher, such as like stand up or sit down. This created by Dr. James Esser's This method mimics how children learn their first language, and the objective from this method is to help beginners understand and remember English words through actions. And the advantage from this method is engage student in active learning, reduce anxiety and makes learning more fun, and also in this method have a disadvantage, and this advantage is best for beginners, not ideal for advanced or abstract topics. The next method is grammatical translation method, or we call GTM. GTM focuses on the translating English sentence into the student native language with an emphasis on the grammar rules. The objective from this method is to deepen understanding of grammar and vocabulary. And the advantage is useful for reading and writing, helps students understand, and the advantage is limited speaking and listening practice that can feel repetitive and less engaging. The last method that I will explain is about communicative approach. This method is emphasize real-life communication. Students practice speaking through discussion, role plays, and games, focusing on natural conversation. And the objective from this method is to build confidence in using English in daily situations. And we have the advantage from this method is encourage speaking and listening, makes learning more interactive and enjoyable. And the disadvantage is less focus on the grammar and also challenging for a beginner without a strong English foundation. After I explained about the method 1 and the method 2, I would like to explain about another topic. And the topic is about teaching approach and communicating approach. But before that, I would like to tell you about the definition and the objective from the teaching approach and communicating approach. First is what are the teaching approach? The approach is the strategy used by the instructor to deliver the subject matters. The two increase student understanding and engagement. And what is communication approach? Communication approach is the way the instructor interact and communicate with student to build a rapport and create a positive learning environment. So in this topic, there is types of teaching approach. The first is traditional approach. In this traditional approach, there is lecture, direct teaching, constructive approach, project-based learning, collaborative learning, differentiated approach, and the last is customized of material according to student needs. And the next is constructive approach, and the key principle from this approach is a student construct knowledge through experience and interaction, like example, group discussion, partial experiments. And the next approach is differentiated, and the key principle from this approach is accommodate different learning styles and needs of students. The example like varied assignment, use of technology in the learning. The last is communication approach. Key component from the communication approach is a verbal, use of a spoken language in teaching, and non-verbal, facial expressions, body movement, and eye contact. Question and answer, encouraging students to ask questions and discuss. We go to the next topic, is about a content-based approach. A content-based approach, or we can call it CBA, focuses on using content from specific subject areas as the medium for teaching and learning a language. This approach integrates language learning with academic content, emphasizing meaningful communication and practical language use rather than isolated grammar or vocabulary exercise. It is widely used in a context where learners need to develop both language skills and knowledge in a specific field. In this topic, we have a key features of the CBA or content-based approach. Okay, the first is integration of language and content. In this integration of language and content, there is the language is taught as a means to understand and communicate about particular subject. The example like science, history, and art. Both language skill like listening, speaking, reading, and also writing is subject-specific knowledge are developed simultaneously. The next is authenticity. Material are often drawn from a real-world source, such as like textbook, article, videos, or discussion that making the learning process more engaging and relevant. The next is focus on meaning. Language is learned in context with an emphasis and understanding, expressing ideas rather than memorizing rules. The fourth is learner centers. These activities are designed to be interactive and involve problem solving, collaboration, and also critical thinking. And in this topic, we have a component of CBA material. The first is content objective. Define what knowledge or skills students should gain from the subject matters. Next is authentic. Use material that reflect real-world usage, such as article, infographic, podcasts, or videos related to the topic. Next is language objective, specifically the language skills and the functions student will develop. And next is activities. Activities combine language skill with content understanding. The whole English approach is a method of a language learning that emphasizes the integration of various language aspects in a real-world context to enhance student overall language proficiency through authentic learning experience. So the key principle from this one is the first is use of authentic. The second is experience-based learning interaction and real-life experience. The third is integration of skills. The whole English approach activities, such as small group discussion to enhance understanding. The second is dialogue journals without grades for self-expression. Students created storybooks to foster creativity. And the advantage from this talk is increased student motivation and engagement, focus on real-life experience, and the use of authentic material. And also we have this disadvantage is criticism regarding direct instruction methods, challenge in understanding authentic text for some students. And the next is about the literature-based approach. The literature-based approach to teaching literacy emphasizes using authentic, engaging literature as a foundation for learning. This approach goes beyond simply reading stories. It encourages students to actively engage with text, explore its themes, and develop their own interpretation. This method fosters a love of reading and deepens comprehension and promotes critical thinking skills. The next topic is about importance of assessment in language learning motivation and progress. Assessment provide feedback and motivation, encouraging learners to track their development and work towards improvement. Teaching and learning helps teachers tailor their instruction to meet individual needs and adjust their approach to optimize learning outcomes. Accountability assessment offers a clear picture of learner progress, ensuring accountability to stakeholders like parents and administrators. Next is comparing evaluation approach in language teaching. This presentation explores various methods of evaluating language learners that focusing on the evaluation from traditional assessment to more communicative and performance-based approach. And in this topic, there is a traditional approach to language assessment. The first is multiple choice questions. This measure grammatical accuracy and vocabulary knowledge through objective, standardized tests. The second is fill in the blanks exercise. Assess learner understanding of grammar, vocabulary, and syntax in control settings. And the last is number third. The translation task test learner ability to transfer language between their native language and the target language. And the next is limitation of traditional assessment methods. And the first is limited real-world application. Traditional methods often focus on grammar and vocabulary, but don't reflect real-life language use and communication skills. Okay, and the second is lack of authenticity. The test situations are often artificial and fail to capture the dynamic and unpredictable nature of language used in a real-world settings. The next is overemphasize on form. This method primarily focus on form, neglecting fluency and overall communicative ability in favor of grammatical accuracy. Next is emergence of communicative language testing. Focus on communication, CLT emphasizes the ability to use language for meaningful communication and interaction. Authentic tasks, CLT use tasks that mimic real-life scenarios and require learner to apply language skills in content. Integration of skill, CLT promotes the integration of all language skills, such as speaking, listening, reading, and also writing, in a holistic manner. Next is principle of communicative language assessment. Authenticity assessment should use tasks and scenarios that are relevant to learner real-life experience and needs. Communicative competence. Evaluation should assess learner ability to communicate effectively, taking into account fluency, accuracy, and appropriate. The next that I will explain is formative feedback assessment should provide ongoing and constructive feedback that helps learner identify area for improvement and refine their language skills. Assessing speaking and writing. Role-play skills simulated real-world scenarios and require learner to communicate it effectively using the target language, debate, and the discussion. Allow the learner to express their opinion, argue point, and engage in spontaneous communication. The next is oral presentation that provide a platform for the learners to demonstrate their ability to communicate effectively in a formal setting. Next is integrating formative and summative evaluation. Formative assessment, ongoing assessment, provide a regular feedback and guides to help learners improve their language skills. Summative assessment, evaluation at the end of a unit for course measures learner overall progress and achievement. Next is balanced approach, integrating both formative and summative assessment, create a comprehensive picture of learner development. Alright guys, we go to the next topic is understanding productive and respective skill. The first that I will tell you is about productive skills. Productive skill is a skill that involves the learner to actively produce the language. These skills are often referred to as active skills, and these skills include two things, that is writing and also speaking. Writing is the ability to compass written text that is coherent and grammatically correct. And the next is speaking, that the ability to communicate verbally, express thought, ideas, and also opinions. And next is receptive skills. Receptive skills are skills that involve the understanding and interpretation of language by the learners. These skills are often referred to as passive skills. These skills include listening and also the reading. The next that I will tell you about is teaching receptive skills, listening and also reading. The first is listening. First, develop a listening strategy. Use various material. Provide pre-listening activities over post-listening activities. And next is reading. That is a component. The first is build vocabulary. Develop reading strategies. Use authentic material. And the fourth is encourage activities reading. The next is teach productive skills like speaking and writing. This first is speaking. Speaking is focus on fluency and accuracy. Create a supportive environment. Use authentic material. Provide a feedback. And the next is writing. Writing is build a strong foundation, effective writing model, offer coaching training. And the last is encourage revision and editing. Okay, the last topic that I will provide to you guys is teaching for adult learners. What is adult learning? Adult learning refers to the education and training pursued by mature learners. It is the process by which adults gain knowledge, competence, and skills, whether formally or informally. It emphasizes learning that is relevant to immediate application at the learners, usually college age or older, making sure they are in charge of their own development. And this material or topic talk about andragogy that developed in 1968 by Malcolm Knowles. Andragogy is a term that refers to the concept of adult learning and how it differs from children's education. Knowledge defines andragogy as the art and science of teaching adults. According to Knowles, andragogy, also known as adult learning, is premised on 5 key assumptions. The first is self-concept, the second is adult learner experience, the third is readiness to learn, the fourth is orientation of learning, and the last is motivation to learn. Knowles believed that these are the 5 pillars of adult learning, and each must be taken into account for shaping adult programs accordingly. Today, the education program for adult training are still built around andragogy instead of education being teacher-centered. Much of the curriculum focus is given to students and their learning needs. Okay, this is 5 pillars that I mentioned before. The first is self-concept. As people grow older. As people grow older, they become more independent and turn to a more self-direct learning approach. Unlike children who are dependent on the other for learning and understanding, adults have more control and responsibility over their personal education and progression. The second is adult learner experience. Over time, adults gain innumerable experience that deepen their resource for planning, placing them in a position where they can use their experience as a useful tool in a self-education. Based on these assumptions, adult education program must usually center around experimental tasks and open. and open discussion based on what learner already know. Okay guys, we move to the next pillars. The third is readiness to learn. The third element in knowledge adult learning theory is the learner readiness to learn. As mature learners take on various roles in society, their readiness or motivation to learn become oriented towards the skills necessary for those roles. Whether they are an employee, parent, spouse, or citizen, a large part of their readiness to learn is directed toward these roles. The next is orientation of learning. For children, the application of subject is postponed in later life, and their orientation of learning is usually subject-centered. The things they learn at school are not normally applied to real-life problems, and they must wait until they are older and encounter a need for the skill and knowledge they acquired. This is in contrast the knowledge adult learning theory, where the application of learning becomes immediate and more problem centered as the learner matters. When adults encounter issues and complications, they immediately apply their knowledge to solve those problems. The last pillar is a motivation to learn. The last assumption in the knowledge adult learning theory relates to motivation. According to knowledge, adults are motivated to learn internally. Their desire for career growth and professional development drives their motivation to pursue education. Okay, the next is we talk about self-centered learning. In a sense, self-direct learning is an informal learning process that takes place outside the traditional classroom settings. In this approach, the learner decides about the method, content, research, and evaluation of learning programs. By determining their needs, setting goals, and seeking research, learning assumes full responsibility for the learning process. The next is, we talk in this topic is about transformative learning. Transformative learning challenges students' underlying assumptions and opinions about the world. In doing so, learners become more encouraged to apply critical thinking when they're forming their belief and judgment. For instance, English language learning often experience an improved opinion of themselves and shift in their view of the US culture as they learn the new language. Transformative learning theory touch on two basic kinds of learning: instrumental and communicative. Instrumental learning include task-oriented problem solving, as well as the determination of cause and effect relationship. Meanwhile, communicative learning emphasizes how learners communicate and needs, feelings, and desires. Okay guys, thank you for your kind attention. I'm sorry if I have a mistake. And that's all for me. So, happy watching guys. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.